Mario was probably with me with two houses getting kicked in, but the oldest one, Juke, he was with me maybe with 3 or 4 houses that I had that, the doors got kicked in.
Before the world knew him as Yo Gotti, before Epic Records and Cocaine Music Group, before the platinum plaques and the boardroom meetings, there was a woman in North Memphis that the streets didn't just respect. They feared her. They called her Mama Gotti. And according to his own family, in their own words, in a documentary they chose to release to the world, she didn't just survive in one of the toughest pockets of Memphis, she ran it. Here's what makes this story different from everything else floating around online. This didn't come from a leaked rumor or a tabloid. In 2016, when Yo Gotti dropped his album The Art of Hustle through Epic Records, he released a 14-minute documentary alongside it called Born Hustler. He put his own mother, his aunts, and his late brother on camera to tell their story in their own words. That was a deliberate choice. He wanted the world to understand exactly where he came from before he became one of hip-hop's most successful independent moguls. And what that family revealed is one of the most layered origin stories in the culture. To understand it, you have to understand Fraser in North Memphis during the 80s and early 90s. The neighborhood had shifted heavily through white flight and economic disinvestment, leaving behind aging housing stock, underfunded schools, and a community with far fewer resources than it needed. At the same time, the crack epidemic was moving through working-class black neighborhoods across the country, and Memphis got hit hard. The city's location along major interstate corridors connecting Texas, the Gulf Coast, and the Midwest made it a regional distribution hub, and neighborhoods like Fraser ended up on the front lines of all of it. For a single mother raising multiple children in the Ridgecrest apartments in Fraser during that period, the legitimate options were genuinely thin. Entry-level jobs were disappearing, public assistance wasn't closing the gap, and an entire generation of parents in neighborhoods like that one were trying to figure out how to keep their households running with almost nothing available to them. That's the world Geraldine Mims and her sisters were trying to survive inside of. What they built inside it is what the family put on camera. In the Born Hustler documentary, Gotti's late brother Anthony, known as Big Juke, sat down and said it plainly. He described their mother as being known throughout all of North Memphis, said she was their version of John Gotti, said she supplied a lot of people throughout the apartment complex, and that's exactly what earned her that level of respect. That's not a stranger speculating. That's her own son describing what he witnessed growing up in those apartments. And in the streets, reputation is currency. You don't need a storefront. You need people to know your name carries weight, that you're reliable, that you're protected, and that you're not someone to cross. According to the family's own account, that's what Geraldine Mims built over years in Fraser, working with her sisters, moving through bloodline and trust rather than anything written down. That's how operations like that survived back then. Tight circles, real loyalty, and a name that did half the work before anything else. The same visibility that built her reputation is also what brought the weight down on her. During that era, the DEA and federal prosecutors were working hand-in-hand with local Memphis police through joint task forces, specifically targeting operations that had established real infrastructure, steady networks, repeat suppliers, and visible material wealth that made certain names stand out. An operation known well enough that people in the neighborhood openly compared her to organized crime royalty was exactly the kind of target these investigations were designed to build cases against. They moved slow, years of surveillance and informants before anything went to court. And asset forfeiture laws meant that when it came down, it wasn't just an arrest. The homes, the cars, everything built over those years could be seized separately from whatever criminal penalties followed. According to what the family has shared, that's ultimately what happened. The operation came under pressure, the legal consequences hit, and the material world that had been built got stripped away at once. One day there's a structure, money moving, status in the neighborhood. The next, there's a court case and a restart from zero. For a household built around that income for years, the collapse reorganizes everything. The daily rhythm, the sense of identity, the way basic needs get handled, it all changes overnight. That's the reality a lot of families who lived through that exact era had to face, and the Mims family was no exception. And that's the environment a young Mario Mims was absorbing. The rise, the visible success, the fall, all of it close enough to leave a permanent mark on how he thought about hustle, ownership, and what real success was supposed to look like. Before he was Yo Gotti, he was a teenager going by Lil Yo, putting out mixtapes on the streets of Memphis in the mid to late 90s. Memphis rap during that era ran on independent hustle, local DJs, tapes physically put into people's hands, names built block by block without any industry infrastructure helping. He built his name the same way his mother built hers, through local reputation and relentless work in a city that doesn't hand out shortcuts. He rebranded to Yo Gotti and spent the 2000s grinding through independent releases until 2009, when the breakout record 5-Star pushed him from respected regional name to legit national artist. From there, he built CMG into a real operation, developing artists like Moneybagg Yo into major names, proving the label could function as an actual hit-making structure rather than just a platform for Gotti himself. The business instincts that showed up in how he built CMG track directly to something deeper. He's spoken publicly about buying himself out of multiple record deals at close to $500,000 each, taking a short-term financial hit to protect long-term ownership and control over his masters. That same instinct, that control and ownership matter more than quick surface-level wins, is exactly what he watched modeled in Fraser decades earlier in a completely different context. But the part of this story that says the most about who Geraldine Mims actually is doesn't come from what she built during those years. It comes from what she chose after everything collapsed. After losing everything the operation had built, she didn't go back. According to what the family has shared, she went and worked an entry-level job at a local grocery store for $5.25 an hour. A woman once compared to John Gotti himself, who had commanded that level of respect in her own neighborhood, clocking in for minimum wage retail work to stay on a legitimate path permanently. That's a choice that didn't have any obvious financial upside. It would have been easy, given her established connections and reputation, to find a way back into the same world. She chose the longer, slower, far less lucrative road instead, and she stayed on it. Years later, once Gotti's career was fully established, the dynamic flipped completely. He's spoken publicly about taking care of his mother, making sure she never has to worry about money the way she did in Fraser. Part of how that's shown up is through Pride, his high-end restaurant in Memphis, where reports connected to the family described Geraldine Mims working in a role tied to the kitchen. The same discipline and commanding presence that once built her name throughout North Memphis redirected entirely into something legitimate, something her son built from the ground up, something she can be proud of without looking over her shoulder. It's a striking image when you really sit with it. The woman once compared by her own son to John Gotti, standing in the kitchen of a restaurant her son built from scratch. Her reputation transformed, her hustle redirected, her name now attached to something she doesn't have to fear losing. What makes this story land the way it does isn't really about the specific details of one family's circumstances. It's about what's recognizable in it across so many households who lived through similar conditions in cities like Memphis during that stretch of American history. The broader pattern, resources built out of limited, legitimate options, federal pressure eventually dismantling that economy, a family working to rebuild on legal terms after, played out across countless neighborhoods during that period. What separates this particular story is what came after, and the fact that the family chose to put it on record themselves, on their own terms, in a documentary attached to an album literally called The Art of Hustle. Gotti wasn't hiding this or pretending it didn't happen. He made it the foundation of how he wanted his origin story understood. The hustle that once ran through Fraser now runs through a record label developing the next generation of Memphis talent and through the kitchen of a restaurant where his mother gets to work fully legitimate, fully protected, fully taken care of. 2 generations, 1 bloodline. The same instinct for building something, finally finding a home that doesn't have an expiration date built into it. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe for more breakdowns on the real history behind the biggest names in the culture.